When someone who has seen the world, who has walked across red carpets, spoken in halls of power, and touched corners of the earth that most only dream of, suddenly pauses and says, "It was the Quran that changed me," the world takes notice. Angelina Jolie, known to millions for her artistry and activism, once found herself facing something deeper than celebrity and louder than applause. She had reached heights of success, yet the silence of her own heart grew louder by the day. There was something missing, something fame, fortune and freedom could not fill. It wasn't a public moment, nor was it a headline that guided her to the Quran. It was a private moment late at night, after the world had grown quiet, when all the cameras were off and all the people were gone. In those moments, the human soul begins to whisper what it truly craves, and her soul was whispering something more, a thirst, not for another award or role or mission, but for meaning, for answers, for truth. And that's when the journey began, a journey not into a film or across a battlefield, but into the pages of the Quran. She once said, "I picked it up out of curiosity, but as I read, I felt like it was reading me." These are not words of someone chasing attention. These are words of someone who stood face to face with revelation, who saw herself mirrored in stories of struggle, mercy, hope and return. It's a moment many people can relate to when you open the Quran, not knowing what you'll find, only to discover that it knows exactly where you are in life. The Quran does not need an introduction. It does not beg to be understood. It is not just a book, it is a voice, a healing, a direction. Angelina Jolie's words echo something timeless, something many feel but struggle to explain. When the Quran speaks, it doesn't just inform, it transforms. It doesn't only educate, it elevates. It was not designed merely for the Arabs, nor just for scholars. It was sent down for hearts. For broken hearts, for searching hearts, for exhausted hearts, for hearts that have tried everything else and still feel empty. She reflected on the verses about orphans and the oppressed. Those weren't just words to her, they were her life. Having worked with displaced children, war victims and forgotten communities, she felt as though the Quran was validating every emotion she had once struggled to name. When she read the verse that says, "And they give food in spite of love for it to the needy, the orphan and the captive, saying, we feed you only for the sake of Allah. We desire from you neither reward nor thanks." It resonated so deeply she paused. In her heart she whispered, "This is what I've been trying to do. This is what I've been longing for." That is what the Quran does. It takes the unspoken parts of your soul and gives them language. It takes the scattered pieces of your past and shows you how they all pointed to one direction, back to the one who created you. The world often views people like Angelina Jolie through a filtered lens. But beyond the glamour there is a soul that was aching, seeking, reaching for light. And when she encountered the words of Allah, she didn't see them as foreign or restrictive. She saw them as liberating. She spoke of the verse where Allah says, "Indeed with hardship comes ease." She said it felt like the verse was breathing with her, as if it was hugging every moment of despair she had ever experienced. And the beauty of that verse is not just in its message, it is in the way it was sent. Not once, but repeated twice, as if to emphasize, as if to console the reader, as if to say, you were never meant to break, you were meant to bend and come back stronger. There are many who believe that the Quran is difficult to approach. But ask anyone who has read it with an open heart and they will tell you that the Quran makes things clear. Angelina found in it not just clarity but comfort. She found purpose not in the eyes of the world but in the words of the Lord. When she came across the descriptions of justice, mercy, accountability and the infinite compassion of the Creator, it was like the missing puzzle pieces finally fell into place. Not because she needed to impress anyone, but because for the first time she felt seen by the one who knows her better than she knows herself. She once reflected, "I didn't expect it to be so intimate. It was as though it knew exactly what I'd been through." This is the power of divine words. You could read a verse today and it may mean something entirely different to you years from now, because the Quran speaks not to your timeline but to your soul. It doesn't change, you do. And through that change, the Quran becomes your lifelong companion. Many may wonder what it means when a public figure engages with the Quran. Is it a statement, a phase, a rebellion? But for those who've tasted the sweetness of revelation, it is none of those things. It is a return, a return to what the soul was always connected to. Angelina's journey with the Quran is not a spectacle. It is a reminder that no matter how far you travel in the world, how many achievements you gather, or how much applause you receive, the soul will always crave the one who created it. When she read about forgiveness, not just of others, but being forgiven by Allah, it shook her. Because the world doesn't always forgive, but Allah does. And not only does He forgive, He loves to forgive. And that love is unconditional. That love is liberating. That love doesn't require you to be perfect. It only asks you to be sincere. It wasn't just the stories of prophets or the laws that moved her. It was the tone, the patience, the rhythm. The way the Quran speaks directly to the reader, calling out gently, repeatedly, using words like, "O mankind, and O you who have believed, and my mercy encompasses all things." That language is not by accident. That language is love. She read the stories of Maryam, of Hajar, of Asiya, women of strength, courage and faith, and said she felt honored by how the Quran uplifts the dignity of women, not by exposure but by character. She said, the strength described in these women is not in what they wore or how they appeared. It was in their patience, their trust in God, their sacrifices, their hearts. And for a woman who had been objectified by media, judged by tabloids, and surrounded by superficial standards, this was revolutionary. And that's what the Quran does. It frees you from needing the validation of anyone except the one who made you. It teaches you that your worth is not in your body, not in your bank account, not in your beauty, but in your belief, in your intention, in your striving. She once described feeling overwhelmed by the verse that says, "Say, O my servants who have wronged themselves, do not despair of the mercy of Allah. Indeed, Allah forgives all sins." She said it felt like someone finally told her it's okay to begin again. And isn't that what so many people are longing for? A chance to begin again, to be seen not as who they were, but as who they're trying to become. There is a special kind of silence that enters the heart when it begins to understand the words of its creator. Angelina Jolie described it not as a loud, overwhelming moment, but a quiet unlocking of something buried deep within. She once said, "I've heard a lot of powerful things in my life, but the words in this book weren't like anything else. They made me feel small, but not worthless, more like humbled." That's what happens when the soul recognizes truth. It doesn't inflate the ego, it purifies it. As she continued to read, she didn't skip over the verses of accountability or consequence. In fact, those verses affected her the most, not because of fear, but because of clarity. The idea that every soul would stand before its maker alone, without agents, without cameras, without influence, struck her deeply. The Quran paints a vivid picture of a day when nothing else will matter except the condition of your heart and the weight of your deeds. She said, that kind of responsibility scared me, but in the best way possible. It made me want to fix things inside me, around me. Accountability in this world often comes with loopholes. But in the sight of Allah, there are no lawyers to defend your lies, no editors to cut out your flaws. And yet, the beauty is the one who will judge you is also the one who has given you endless chances to change. That's why she said it felt like the Quran was not there to condemn her, but to call her to something higher, not to imprison her in rules, but to free her from the chains of regret and emptiness. She began reflecting on the nature of mercy. Mercy in the Quran is not just a side trait, it is foundational. It opens every chapter, it leads every verse. The one who revealed the Quran introduced himself with Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, the most merciful, the especially merciful. This moved her, because the world had shown her glimpses of harshness, betrayal, abandonment. But the Quran showed her a Lord who forgives before you ask, who waits for you even when you walk away, who answers you before you finish speaking. She felt particularly drawn to the names of Allah, not just as titles, but as descriptions of divine traits that no human could possess fully. She would say, I've heard people call themselves powerful, but reading about Al-Qawi'i, the truly strong, reminded me how small all that power really island in every name. She found a correction for a broken part of herself. In Al-Hakim, she found wisdom that comforted her confusion. In Al-Latif, she found gentleness that soothed her scars. In Ash-Shafi, the healer, she found hope that her emotional wounds were not permanent. She once described crying when she read the verse, He is with you wherever you are. She had spent years moving from place to place, sometimes not knowing where she belonged. But this verse gave her a kind of belonging that no country, culture or career had given her. To feel that you are never alone, not even in a hotel room, in a war zone, not even when the world misunderstands you, not even when your own heart feels distant, is a comfort that changes how you live. Angelina had been praised by millions for her courage, but she admitted that the stories of the prophets in the Quran humbled her. The patience of Prophet Ayub, the trials of Prophet Yusuf, the forgiveness of Prophet Muhammad, the wisdom of Prophet Sulaiman, she said, it felt like each story was not just history but medicine. Every verse was a lesson wrapped in beauty. She would pause after reading, letting the words sink in slowly, not trying to finish a chapter but trying to feel it. There was a particular verse that stayed with her, and whoever puts their trust in Allah, He is sufficient for them. She reflected, I've trusted people before, many of them disappointed me. But this verse didn't ask me to trust blindly, it invited me to trust the one who never breaks a promise. She said that kind of trust brought her a new kind of calm. A calm that didn't depend on stability around her, but certainty within her. She began to realize something many others realize. When reading the Quran with sincerity, it doesn't speak to your mind only, it speaks to your state. It meets you where you are. If you are grieving, it comforts. If you are arrogant, it humbles. If you are lost, it guides. If you are empty, it fills. That is not the work of human authorship. That is the miracle of revelation. She started to read more about prayer, not as a ritual, but as a conversation. She said, the idea that I could speak to God directly without needing anyone in between was incredibly freeing. I didn't need to perform. I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to be present. The verse is about those who pray in the middle of the night, not to impress, but to seek closeness, deeply moved her. She would sometimes sit in silence after reading them, imagining what that kind of prayer would feel, like the kind that doesn't ask for the world, but only for nearness to the one who made the world. She was touched by how the Quran defended the weak, the poor, the enslaved, the women, the orphans, the strangers. It didn't glorify the powerful, but honored the patient. She said it made her rethink success. For years she had chased achievement, but the Quran taught her that true achievement was not in what you build, but in what you become. Not in how high you rise, but in how sincerely you return. There's a verse she said she could never forget. Whoever does an atom's weight of good will see it. That one verse, she said, changed how she viewed the smallest choices in life. Every smile, every honest word, every hidden charity, none of it would be lost. That gave her a sense of purpose even in moments that seemed invisible to the world. Angelina once said, the more I read, the more I saw the world differently. I began to see people not by what they have or say, but by what they carry inside. This was one of the most profound shifts in her journey. She began seeing through the lens of the Quran, not with judgment, but with reflection. She would read verses about arrogance and ask herself, am I carrying that? She would read verses about the hereafter and whisper, am I preparing for that? This kind of transformation does not come from surface reading, it comes from sincerity, from vulnerability, from a soul that genuinely wants to change. Her reading of the Quran was not academic, it was personal, it was intimate. She described the Quran not just as a book, but as a companion, something that stayed with her even when she closed it. A voice that continued to echo in her heart long after the words had been read. And the more she engaged with it, the more she felt pulled away from the noise of the world, not in isolation, but in elevation. As though the Quran was lifting her above the chaos, showing her what really mattered. She once mentioned how the concept of Tawbah, repentance, was unlike anything she had seen before. That you could fall 1,000 times and still be welcomed back as long as you were sincere. That your past didn't define you, that your future wasn't cancelled because of yesterday's mistakes. She said, that kind of forgiveness, it's divine. No human loves you like that. And truly no one does. That is the kind of mercy only Allah offers, a mercy that finds you even when you've run far, a mercy that embraces you when you feel ashamed, a mercy that waits patiently for you to come home. She was also moved by how the Quran emphasized both justice and compassion. That one did not cancel the other. That a believer was meant to be principled but also soft-hearted. That you could speak truth but still do it with wisdom. That you could be firm without being cruel. These were values she had been searching for. Balance, depth, sincerity. The kind of moral compass that doesn't change based on popularity or mood. Angelina's connection to the Quran grew not through pressure but through peace. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It wasn't about converting for applause or rebelling against culture. It was about healing, about filling the cracks that fame and travel could never fill. The Quran became a mirror, a map and a message reminding her of who she was, who she could be, and who was always there watching, waiting, loving her unconditionally. The journey into the Quran continued to unfold like layers of a flower blooming slowly with light. Angelina began to notice how every emotion she had once tried to suppress, fear, regret, longing, guilt, was actually addressed in this book. But instead of being dismissed, these emotions were acknowledged, validated, and then healed through divine perspective. She often paused on the verses that spoke of the heart, because the Quran didn't just talk about actions, it addressed what lies behind them, the intention, the sincerity, the condition of the heart. Verses like, on that day, nothing will benefit except the one who comes to Allah with a sound heart, became her new measure of success. She began to ask herself not just what she was doing, but why. Not just who she appeared to be, but who she was in secret. The Quran became a filter through which she re-evaluated her priorities. She began questioning the world she had once chased. The awards, the status, the admiration, it all started to seem like a shadow of something bigger. The Quran kept whispering to her, there is more, there is meaning, there is a reason you were created. Don't settle for the illusion of success. Seek the one who gave you your soul. She found herself deeply touched by the verses about paradise, not just the descriptions of its beauty, but of its people. People who forgive, who give in secret, who lower their wings in humility, who respond to ignorance with peace. These weren't people who were perfect, they were people who struggled but turned back, who cried in private, who helped others while carrying their own burdens. She realized that Islam was not a religion of angels, it was a path for broken humans who wanted to be whole again. She said once, I thought I knew what peace was, but I was wrong. Peace is not silence, it's not even comfort, it's knowing your soul is finally home. The Quran gave her that home. Verse after verse, she felt as though she was being gently rebuilt, not into someone new, but into someone truer. She didn't feel brainwashed, she felt awakened, as though 1,000 walls had been removed from her heart, and she could finally breathe without the weight of confusion. When she reached the chapter of Maryam, Surah Maryam, it was as though the words had been written for her. A woman of strength misunderstood, a mother who suffered silently, a soul chosen by her Lord for a special role. She cried reading about Maryam's isolation, her pain, and the divine words of comfort sent to her, do not grieve. Your Lord has placed a stream beneath you. She said it felt as though those words were being spoken to her directly in her own moments of grief. That was the Quran's miracle. It didn't feel like it was addressing a crowd. It felt like it was addressing you. She admired how the Quran never glorified ego. Even prophets cried. Even the most righteous made mistakes and were corrected. This reminded her that perfection was not the goal, returning to Allah was. She said, this book doesn't expect me to be perfect. It expects me to keep trying, to keep walking, to keep turning back no matter how many times I fall. And that realization freed her from the crushing weight of guilt that had followed her for years. One of the most life-altering moments for her was reading the verse, and we have certainly created man, and we know what his soul whispers to him, and we are closer to him than his jugular vein. That changed everything. To think that the one who created her knew every whisper of doubt, every secret tear, every moment of despair, and was still closer to her than anyone else, brought a level of comfort she had never known. She began praying not out of obligation but out of longing. She didn't understand every word at first, but she understood the feeling of bowing before the Creator, of pressing her head to the ground, not in defeat but in peace. She said it made her feel more human, more grounded, more real. The prayer didn't disconnect her from the world, it anchored her within it. As she read more, she came across the verse, indeed with hardship comes ease, not after hardship with it. That one verse became her light in the dark. She began seeing her past not as a punishment but as preparation. Every hardship had carved out space for understanding. Every pain had softened her. Every loss had led her to search deeper. And that search led her to the Quran. She admired how Islam wasn't just about belief but about character. How the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught mercy to those who wronged him, gave to those who denied him, and smiled at those who hated him. She once said, I've met many powerful people, but power without mercy is empty. This faith taught me that true strength is in forgiveness and true beauty is in humility. She continued reading, learning and reflecting, not for show, not for approval, but for truth. The more she understood, the more she fell in love with the wisdom, the clarity, the fairness and the profound mercy that flowed through every chapter. The Quran didn't just ask her to worship, it asked her to become honest, to become kind, to become patient, to become light in a dark world. And over time, that light began to show in her, not through speeches, not through declarations, but through small, quiet changes, through peace in her eyes, through gentleness in her speech, through intention in her actions. That is the mark of a heart touched by the Quran. It doesn't always speak loudly, but it shines. She once described her entire journey with one sentence: the Quran didn't change who I am, it revealed who I've always been beneath the noise. That is the power of divine words. They don't erase your story, they rewrite it with meaning. She understood something most people never slow down to grasp. The Quran is not a book you finish, it's a journey you live. You don't conquer it, it conquers you in the most beautiful way. You begin as a reader, but you end as someone who has been read. Every verse, every story, every command peels away a layer of ego, a layer of illusion, until what remains is someone real, someone sincere, someone returned. And in that return, she found what she had been searching for all along. Not fame, not purpose, not peace, but Allah. If you'd like, I can now create the title, thumbnails, YouTube description and tags for this complete story.